The following is part from a Q&A interview I did with Euractiv Greece in late July 2024, following the Climate Reality Project training in Rome, Italy. The training was focused in the Mediterranean countries, which are and will be affected more severely from the climate emergency and the unstable weather patterns as time goes by. Share your experience as a former trainee and how it pushed you to get involved in climate action. I came into the climate reality training through my personal inquiry to understand what was going on behind the extreme weather events and the increasing environmental pollution, both of which affected communities I was living in and working within the United States. I was also becoming increasingly aware of the impact those events had in the communities, primarily through people losing their homes and livelihoods, and the biodiversity loss through agricultural fields and old-growth forest fires, which had sustained these communities for a long time. And while I was aware of the interconnected impacts, I did not have the knowledge of the data and science behind what was going on. Participating in the April 2021 virtual training in the USA equipped me with the knowledge that I needed, while also connecting me with an inner overwhelming grief about the reality of what was going on already around the world with regards to the extreme weather events and impacts on daily life for millions of people. Because of my health-related background and trauma-informed facilitation work, I was inspired to delve deeper in the field of planetary health and more recently to the area of climate justice and the human right to a healthy environment, while continuing to support community holistic health and well-being and the capacity building of our own social resilience to navigate the climate emergency. Why do you place your focus on Southeastern Europe? The recent climate reality training in Rome focused on Southern Europe from Portugal to Greece. This is because Southern Europe and the Mediterranean are a hotspot for growing climate risks, which affect millions of people on a daily basis. These countries depend to a great extent on nature-based tourism, which is impacted in turn by extreme heat, forest fires, pollution, and the loss of local ecosystems. While also, we need to keep in mind the change in the fishing industry due to a change in the sea temperature and the kinds of fish available for consumption, etc. Furthermore, the impacts of heat and drought on water supply for agriculture and food industries pose a threat to both future food supply and clean drinking water supply. The extreme weather events further put a burden on people and animal health, from physical distress due to the heat itself and psychological anxiety and grief due to the loss of personal property and community uprooting, to the shift in land and sea ecosystems in ways that we don't know yet how they will influence current and future generations. If we take Greece as an example here, the forest fires in July and August 2023 burned more than 160,000 hectares of land, with the Evros Thrace fire being the largest recorded hectares burned in Europe's history. Following that, in September 2023, Storm Daniel hit central Greece, an agricultural hub and the most important food supply source for the whole country. The area of Thessaly experienced the biggest rainfall precipitation in a short period of time in Europe's history, with the impacts on animal stock, land use, loss of produce, and people's homes and livelihoods still felt to this day. At the same time, these tragedies exemplified what unpredicted and emergency weather patterns can cause, and the urgent need for the right social structures adaptation to mitigate such impacts. Based on your expertise, how do you believe the collective trauma of the climate crisis will affect societies? For instance, in Greece, each summer we suffer losses because of the fires. Why is resilience a key parameter to our future? The impacts of the climate crisis and extreme weather events are not experienced in the same way by everyone, and the means to alleviate the stresses of such conditions are not available or equal for everyone. This is when the principle of climate justice enters the conversation, which we have seen addressed from the COPs all the way to town hall meetings, all the way to the communities affected and why they're not receiving what they need to overcome, even if partially, and the harm and loss they have endured. Not being acknowledged in that injustice as a community creates pressure and adds to the Not being acknowledged in that injustice as a community creates pressure and adds to the collective and cultural trauma already existing. I believe that we have been seeing the effects of the climate crisis around the world, especially when we looked at forced migration because people's lands are impacted by drought and they're not able to cultivate their food, nor do they have access to clean drinking water. Thus, by force, they have to leave their homes behind in search for better living conditions. This has a domino effect on the countries they move to, especially if they're not welcomed, affecting in turn the local economy, putting pressure on the social structures which can then create violence, racism and conflict, which results in more forced migration, perpetuating the physical, moral and psychological ill health of people wherever they find themselves in. It is a vicious cycle, and because economies are interrupted and people become more vulnerable to injustices and to poverty, that further affects all current and future generations. A big part of collective trauma is also the loss of cultural inheritance and value systems. Referring again to Greece as an example here, last year's extensive fires and floods resulted not only in the loss of many established ecosystems, but also in the loss of our cultural heritage connected to the specific lands and people's roots in these lands for many, many generations. There was a blow to our country's psyche, which has not been addressed or looked at yet, and that is about the grief for what was lost. By addressing loss, fear, and despair while in community, we embrace the cultural resilience many of our grandparents and great-grandparents had when they had to face wars and cultural harm, including genocide. We thus increase both personal and community capacity, which I believe will prove to be our best infrastructure as we navigate the coming decades. If this collective trauma is left unchecked, it will lead to physical and psychological disease, intergenerational violence, and societal unrest, among other symptoms. What should be done to address that trauma? Any trauma at the collective level needs an equal collective container to process it, and how we build that container can have several functions. For example, 1. We can consider building caring spaces for people to come together and share their experiences, spending time and socializing as they did in the past. I believe in the power of cultural resources to help us find the strength to both support each other and to build the social capacity to withstand extreme challenges. 2. We can provide education for all ages and all citizens to understand what the impact of extreme weather events on individual and community health is, as well as on our immediate environment, including on our animals, our plants and forests, our seas with all its beautiful creatures, while offering simple actions they can all take when these events happen. 3. We can provide funding and reallocation of resources, including skills and infrastructure, to support community-based food and water supply, sanitation systems, and first aid stations. 4. We can support local groups who may already look after the community in any of these ways, including rescuing and taking care of the animals during extreme weather events. Lastly, addressing your question of how do you define a good solution for the climate, I would rephrase it and ask, what are the solutions that will support life at all levels? What will support health and well-being for all ecosystems for current and future generations? If these are the criteria, I believe that we will also be able to choose the right solutions that will support a healthy human and planetary life for generations to come. Thank you.